given the pressures on the motel sector for our refugee claimants and people who are seeking to be refugee claimants along the Kingston Avenue Strip. That is all a sign to me that they are working very diligently, and I'm sure they're pushing their way up through the administration that is very tough on the financial side of things to make sure that these initiatives get funded. So my hat is off to them for doing this, and what I'm about to say should in no way be taken as not being first and foremost thankful for the good work that they do. The reason why this motion is important, and I think the conversation that took place today and the issue, do we ask the feds to open the armories? Do we build more shelters or not? It totally hangs on the issue of whether there is pent-up demand out there and whether we can meet that pent-up demand. Now, even if we are increasing at this rate, but the homelessness is going up at that rate, that's called we have a problem. So what I think I heard from this morning's deputants is that the push, the demand out there, and maybe it's because of the closing of a number of rooming houses. Certainly it is because of the new refugees that are coming in from all over the world, given some of the crises in other countries in the world. That is adding a whole new level of demand for just simply a place to lay one's head tonight that we've never encountered before. So I think the issue of have we put enough money in the budget or have we not put enough money in the budget for 2018, is the infrastructure plan strong enough or not strong enough, rests on that question. When we determined a few years ago that 90% was our standard, it was because that equals we are full. When the staff say, in agreement with many of the deputants, that we're at 96%, then we have to revisit whether the paradigm, whether the standard, not the standard of 90%, but whether we're putting in enough beds. And that's why I think at the end of the day, if it's not the Moss Park, if it's not the Armories, then we have to find another place, and we have to find another place very quickly to make sure that we are accommodating the need that is out there. We are not the primary responsible parties for strengthening and enhancing our housing system, but we are the primary responsible order of government. The bandages, as we sometimes say, we support housing, we don't support shelters because we want housing, but we're the bandages. That is our job, and right now, at the end of the day, we have a way to go to meeting our own internal standard of 90%. So that's, I'm going to be supporting, I hope you can support this motion, but I'm also hoping I will be supporting Councillor Wong Tam's motions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mihevc. Any other speakers? No? Well, I guess we can start voting on these motions. So I have Councillor Wong Tam's motion. Okay.
Mr. Chair, could they be put up on the screen as we vote?
Okay, motion 1 by Councillor Wong Tam. Oh, the screen isn't working. There we go. Thank you. Motion 1 by Councillor Wong Tam. All those in favour? Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Cressy, Councillor Wong Tam, and Councillor Mihevc. All those opposed? Councillor Ford. The motion carries.
We have two motions from Councillor Mihevc.
Councillor Cressy first.
Oh, okay, Councillor Cressy. Put that on the screen. There we go. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Councillor McHavock, motion A. All those in,
Oh, hang on, there's another one by Councillor Cressy. Second one, Councillor Cressy.
another one by Councillor Cressy, motion B. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Councillor McHavock, motion A on the screen. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And motion B, Councillor McHavock.
All those in favor of the motion? Councillor Ford, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Cressy, Councillor Wong Tam, and Councillor Mahek. Motion carries.
Okay, the main item is amended. All those in favor? It carries. We can now move to item 4 for public benefit, whole of government framework to guide City of Toronto relationships with the community-based not-for-profit sector. We have one deputant, Rob Horwath of the Toronto Neighborhood Center. Howard. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Is that on? Okay. With regrets from my colleague Margaret Hancock, she was hoping to be delivering this deputation on behalf of the Community Advisory Table that has worked with the city staff on this policy. So I'm just going to read her deputation. So this is on behalf of the Community Advisory Table for the project before you, for the public benefit whole of government framework to guide the City of Toronto relationships with the community-based not-for-profit sector. We're very pleased to be at the stage of making this deputation to this committee and grateful for the opportunity. We want to thank committee members for setting this process in motion a year ago when you had the foresight to direct staff to, quote, work with a community advisory table to develop a whole of government policy, direction and policy framework for the City of Toronto's relationship with the community-based nonprofit voluntary sector. We're very proud of what we've developed together through a process of intense consultations with many of you, city divisions, and the sector. We would especially like to thank Kelly Murphy for her great work on this, for listening and co-creating an innovative process for the city and the sector in which all voices and concerns could be heard and considered. We're grateful to Chris Brillinger for his vision and leadership in bringing this innovative concept to life. And we're also appreciative of the Social Planning Toronto for their support of the Toronto Nonprofit Network's efforts in the consultation, which included extensive research and convening work with over 200 people from the nonprofit sector across the city, representing 120 service organizations, academic institutions, and funders in focus groups, key informant interviews, and town halls. We're particularly pleased about the engagement of the Alternative Planning Group and the smaller ethno-specific and inter-suburban groups in this process. We know from the parallel consultations organized by the city across city divisions and with city staff that the level of engagement and willingness to think collaboratively about new ways of doing things is deep and broad, and that our excitement is shared. One of the things which we're most proud about is this is the first time the Council has ever considered adopting a whole of government policy on how and why the city relates to the nonprofit sector. This has the potential to be truly transformative. We believe this will set a new foundation for the nonprofit sector and the city to work together to achieve our greatest impacts for all of Torontonians. This project is not intended to limit our flexibility, but to bring about, on a strategic level, more consistency, harmonization of systems where that will bring a benefit to the city and sector and to help achieve shared goals. I'll just highlight some of the elements of the principles and the commitments and the actions in this report about which we are particularly excited. We are reframing the sector as the public benefit sector and starting to communicate what the sector in our city is for, what it achieves, instead of what it is not, the negatively framed nonprofit. This reframing is resonating very well with people in the city and in the sector. Secondly, in keeping with the positive framing of public benefits, the report recognizes the significant scope and impact of the sector as a service delivery partner, but also as an important contributor to policy development, as a foundational partner in democratic engagement, as witnessed today, and this issue prior to this one, and as a central part of the city's economy. We're really pleased by the commitments to numerous actions, which are concrete and achievable. Actions such as creating a city sector table, expanding city sector co-development of policy and implementation, and building inclusive local economies. Something which I think we need to spend more attention on together to actually unravel some of the driving forces behind the previous challenges around shelters and housing. Finally, this work shows the potential we have to tackle the deep challenges of growing economic inequality and poverty, particularly among communities in our city which are racialized and recent immigrants and Indigenous community members. In closing, I want to stress that this framework provides critical support for the public benefit sector to work effectively with the city to advance key shared objectives, including reducing poverty, advancing economic equity and social solidarity, and building resilience, and so much more. We hope that the committee will adopt the report and recommendations, and we are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mihevc.
Yes, thank you very much. And let me say publicly, thank you, Rob, for being a very good partner with the city in developing the not-for-profit sector over a very long and distinguished career, which actually is the setup for the question.
How do you do it?
Well, it is kind of related to that, what my Joe colleague has said. I'm very intrigued by recommendation number 16. Work with the sector to apply a decent work lens to city contracts for not-for-profit organizations. I'm hoping you can expand on it. It is my observation, being a little bit of an older horse myself, that years ago you could actually think of yourself as a recent graduate from university and say, I want to work in the not-for-profit sector, I want to work with a neighborhood house, I want to work for St. Stephen's or what have you, and you could pretty well have a career out of it. These days, I think after many years of, frankly, the feds doing it to the province, doing it to the city, and we've kind of done it a little bit to the not-for-profit sector, we've downloaded a whole bunch of work and really squeezed your budgets, or the not-for-profit's budget, more than anything. And so now I think that what's happened to jobs is that they've become part-timed and, frankly, call it entry level. It's not a place where you can where you can say have a career and raise a family or even a very small family on that income. How big an issue do you think that is to the not-for-profit sector?
It's a very significant issue to the sector in the city right now and in the province. The levels of precarious work, lack of predictable contracts, lack of benefits, lack of pensions, those are endemic, as they are to the broader labor market. The nonprofit sector is not immune from that, and in fact, it has some of the worst cases of that in some instances. We're very supportive of the provincial legislation coming in around the labor legislation, but we also are attempting as a sector to adopt principles of decent work and push on wanting to be decent work employers. And for that, we are looking forward to the partnership with the city around those commitments, because we can't do it alone.
So do you think, and I'm kind of indirectly asking Chris this, but I'm going to ask you this, do you think that whenever we do our CPIP program, that we should ask for salary levels in them to make sure that we are actually contracting with CPIP grant recipients and employing folks at a reasonable rate?
Yes, and building in cost of living increases so that people can keep up with those pressures as well. But all the contracts can be looked at, and the investments to ensure that they give the nonprofit organizations the flexibility to deliver good and predictable contracts on the other end.
Okay, and is there anything you want to add to this whole thing of social procurement? I'm finding a lot, I just want to give you a platform to speak a little bit to that, because I'm finding that in my new role as poverty reduction advocate that there's a lot of dialogue on that happening right now.
The city has done a lot of important work, I think, in the area of social procurement and community benefits, and and anchor institution investment in our city. And I think those hold the key to getting some different economies going that could actually support more inclusive economic activity in our communities. And I feel that the helpfulness of this report is that it names the nonprofit sector as a key part of that puzzle. And I think we can support the sector to play a very deliberative role in being part of this engine of local economic development in an inclusive way. And the city's investments around procurement and other mechanisms are potentially transformative around how the economy works locally. So that there's great stuff to move forward on.
Great, thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mihevc. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions for staff? Councillor Mihevc?
Yes, question to the General Manager of SDFA. Just in the, following up on the CPIP stuff, if you were to do a back-of-envelope calculation, knowing what you know of the sector, CPIP recipients, and if we were to pay them commensurate with a livable wage or a city comparable, how much more are we talking about in CPIP that we would need to increase that budget?
Through the chair, we're taking a look at that question right now. We're actually doing an analysis of CPIP-funded agencies, and we'll be coming to committee in January with a report on the results of that analysis.
Will that be in time for the 2018 budget, or?
It'll be before you in January, and budget isn't at council until February.
Sounds like it won't be. Is there anything preliminarily you can say right now on that?
There is a cost of living increase, and the City of Toronto has been fairly consistent in providing cost of living increases to grant-funded agencies. We're somewhat unique in terms of government funders in that respect, have been maintaining that over a period of years. We have also kept our focus on ongoing program funding to help agencies deal with the issue of precarity, as opposed to project funding or annual funding allocations with no ongoing commitment. With respect to the differential, it will be notable. I would prefer to wait until I see the analysis before giving you a number.
Okay, notable being a good word. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mihevc. Any other questions for staff? Just very briefly, faith groups play a growing role in our city when it comes to social capital, certainly daycare, food banks, out of the cold, counseling. Yet, in your report, I see a passing reference on page 17, and a reference a little earlier as part of the consultation, the Canadian Multi-Faith Federation, but very few, if any, references throughout the document in how we can leverage our faith communities. I'm just wondering whether their role is shrinking as a force for social procurement, or whether that was really not the scope of this study.
To the chair, I wouldn't say that their role is shrinking, and faith groups are often incorporated charities who would fall under the scope of the framework before you. For those that are not incorporated or not delivering human services in a specific way, they would fall into the other group of informal social support entities that we talk about in the report. They are outside of the scope of the framework, but certainly a consideration in moving forward.
So faith groups tend to be charitable registered. Would you consider that different than nonprofit?
No. So whether they're nonprofit incorporated or charitable registered, the differential would be, do they have a human service function that is definable apart from the faith-based function? So for example, We would have funding agreements with different Muslim or Christian or Jewish organizations, based organizations that have a human service function. Perhaps the most obvious example is the Young Men's Christian Association or JBS or other kinds of agencies.
Okay, thank you very much. Speakers. Councillor Mahavik.
I compliment staff and community partners in putting together this report. I think our not-for-profit sector includes some of the unsung heroes of our city. They labor in some very difficult areas of our community and some wonderful areas as well, of course. It's not all dealing with troubled issues, but also recreation, child development, like just the whole gamut of things. And we don't speak of them as a sector, yet the amount of influence, even financially, that they have is absolutely enormous. Never mind the amount of resources that they leverage. For every dollar that they get from us, they leverage from other orders of government, and then they leverage a whole whack of volunteer energy. I would also submit that they are, can you hold on, folks? Sorry. They also are the foundation of democracy in our community, in our city, in our country. People learn about giving and taking and making sure that people are on board through these boards that run these not-for-profit organizations. It's one of the primary ways in which we learn to collaborate as citizens. So bringing a framework up to date, and that includes everything from the amount of money that we give them to making sure that they are entrepreneurial, that they are working with other orders of government, that they're working with our various agency boards and commissions, I think is a notable development and worthy of our support. And with that, I'll move the recommendations of staff.
Any other speakers on this item? The recommendations are before us. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 5, 2017 allocation recommendations for local champions, organizational mentor pilot programs. Farouza Mohammed, steering committee for the local champions pilot project. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, members of City Council, for your continued support and budget allocations to the Local Champions Program pilot project for another 4 years. Today, my colleague Nessa Bubbly and I are here to speak on the Local Champions pilot project for 2016-17. My name is Farouza Mohammed, and I am honored to be a member of the Local Champions Steering Committee in bringing residents' perspectives to this project. In this role, we actively participated in recruitment and selection of applicants through a screening process. During this recruitment process, we observed each individual's ability to work well with others through the lens of group dynamics and interpersonal interactions. The applicants were also asked to exemplify individual and group creativity by answering questions such as, what would your perfect community look like? How would you handle people who dominate meetings? What steps would you use to conduct outreach, and how will that encourage resident participation in community events and activities? What are the tasks required to develop an idea in order to implement a successful community event? And what are some signs to identify when someone might be feeling stressed, and what are some ways to lower the risk of burnout? These solutions have been accepted by George Brown College, where our champions will receive a credit for the human rights course in the community worker program. Our local champions are residents who have demonstrated leadership in community development within their local neighborhood improvement areas and emerging neighborhoods across the city. These champions were recruited based on their individual expertise, experience, and involvement in community and capacity building, as well for their ability to strengthen partnerships with organizations and decision makers geared towards the advancement of the City Council's authorized Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy 2020. City Council members, these champions have open platforms that will advance resident leadership on community building and organizing through group facilitation, maintaining sustainable organizational partnerships, and strengthening confidence in public speaking, as well as other aspects of the curriculum. Through the Local Champions Program pilot, our champions collectively involved 21 participants who contributed 65 hours of deep capacity building efforts, focusing on individual strengths and aspirations. These champions collectively designed and implemented 22 local events in their respective neighborhoods that engaged a total of more than 700 residents in attendance. We are very proud to share that on November 29th, we will honor 12 graduates. That means almost 60% of our champions have successfully participated in and completed all of the curriculum requirements, taking their training out into the communities they serve. This pilot concludes its first cohort with an alumni of 15 people activated and equipped to engage in resident leadership across communities at many levels. My recommendation is that as you continue to fund this exciting project to inspire interest and attract further engagement of more resident leaders in building stronger communities across the city. So now I'll pass it over to Nessa, and she will give you an update on some of the impact and outcomes of this project.
Thank you, Firoza. Just as being a participant of this local champion project, I would like to express my experience, what I learned from. It is a unique platform. It is a platform where I build up my capacity and also sharing, learning. That is a learning process throughout our life. We are learning from each other. So we learn from each other about their stories, success stories, challenges, barriers, and how to overcome those things, and how to be a role model in the community project we can implement with a micro grant, with a partnership initiative, how to strengthen our capacity, how to strengthen build up our community development to make a difference in our community. So this is a great opportunity for all ages of the residents, from youth to engaged seniors also taking the participation. And this is not only the one time, it is a career development opportunity also. We are having we received some of the training from George Brown College, Ryerson University Institute for Change, and also learning lots of stages of the leadership skills, information, and also some of the techniques of the achieve the goals. So I would, as Firoza said, yes, this is. Please consider this. Like a platform, a continuing, study for the residents, leaders who can, avail this opportunity years after years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the deputants? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
again.
much. Questions for staff? Speakers? I have to move a technical amendment requested by staff, so I will put myself on the speakers list. And I will simply put the motion on the screen. Yeah, so, yeah, the clerk is just reminding me, there was a reference in the agenda to an Appendix A. There is no Appendix A. So this just clarifies the wording. All right. All those in favor? The item is amended. Those in favor? It's carried. We have two added items. The first one we received was from Councillor Wong Tam. Sorry, Councillor Mahavik was first. No offense. This item is not before us, but there's a motion here. Income security, a roadmap for change.
Thank you very much. Well, I do think it's worthwhile spend just 30 seconds on it. I want to compliment our Deputy City Manager for participating in the task force that led to the conclusions that are before us. They are absolutely critical for us in the poverty reduction work that is before us. People may remember I was 6 at the time in 1995 when the provincial government of the day reduced social assistance rates by 22%. And then while they were in office, they did not once, I think, even raise them by the inflation rate. And then the subsequent McGuinty government raised them, I think, some years by something like the inflation rate, but never beyond the inflation rate. So we are in a situation where it is almost impossible. You cannot live on OW right now. So this task force got together, made a series of very good recommendations. They're before the cabinet now, and I think it's very, very important for us to go on record as saying this is something that we think is very important and we want to support. They need to know that we've got their back on it the same way we need them to know that we've got their back on $15 minimum wage as well. So this is in light of that. This is probably the single most important effort for the province of Ontario on the anti-poverty fight. If people have a sufficient wage, then or sufficient support, then they can live lives of greater dignity. So let's support the province when they do something right, and in this case, they are doing something right, and have their back. That's the purpose of that motion.
All right.
What's the problem?
So question for the mover, you're asking us to support all the recommendations of a report, and I've looked over it, that is not before us. Do you think that's good process?
I will undertake between now and council, perhaps with the deputy managers, city managers' support, to make sure that every city councillor gets a copy of that report and the executive summary. So you'll know by council what you're voting on? I mean, do you really want 100 pages?
No, I have seen the report. I'm just saying this, I know it's a new business item, but you're asking us to support all the recommendations in this fairly weighty document without it even being here. But that being said, we're recommending it to City Council so people will have the time to read it.
May I suggest that you ask the same question of the deputy city manager? And she can give you an oral, high-level.
No, as I said, I'm familiar with the document. I'm just a little concerned about process, where you're asking us to approve all the recommendations in this document. It's not even before us. So it is a little disconcerting, but it's not out of order.
Can I ask a question of staff?
Sure.
Is it possible to get a briefing note, a very quick briefing note to council, so that people will feel more informed? I think it's a good education opportunity.
So through the chair, we did issue a briefing note, I think just a couple of days after the report was released, so all councillors should have received it. I can reissue that. I should also mention that at the next executive committee, there is going to be, as part of our annual update on our poverty reduction strategy and what we accomplished in 2017 and what the work plan is going to be for 2018. We've also incorporated the work that the recommendations that the work group is making to the province on this, because it's very much aligned with the city's poverty reduction strategy.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Ford?
Just a question to staff. How was that briefing note circulated? Because I have not received that.
Through the chair, we emailed it out.
No.
We can reissue that briefing note.
At least to my office, because
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we should be reviewing, at least have access to staff opinions of the recommendations in these, in the document, and how it affects the city of Toronto.
So through the chair, as I mentioned, the recommendations that are made from the work group are advice to the province. The recommendations are totally aligned with positions that the council has previously taken, and very much aligned with council's poverty reduction strategy. So as I mentioned, we are referencing the roadmap report as part of our update on poverty, as part of our annual update on our own poverty reduction strategy, and there'll be a similar recommendation for supporting that roadmap as part of that committee report.
Well, all I can say is councillors have the chance to read it before it reaches the council floor, and I advise them to do that. No, I'm just saying I strongly urge everyone to make informed decisions about it. It's a weighty document, and they have the chance to read it before now in council. Yeah, we should. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. And so that motion is on the floor, and we have another motion by Councillor Wong Tam. Okay, can we move them both? Okay. All right, so before us is Councillor Mihevic's motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Wong Tam's new business item, improving data collection management of Toronto's homeless population.
I don't have to speak to it, rather than just to move the recommendation in the letter. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and it was circulated in advance now.
I did have a friendly amendment. City Council direct the General Manager of Shelter Housing, Support and Housing meet with the Toronto Political Advocacy Committee with the Medical Society at the Faculty of Medicine, and I was going to slot in, and other interested stakeholders.
I don't see why not. It's, this organization has come forward before us on a couple of occasions, and I think they've already had some preliminary conversations with staff, so it's fine, yeah.
We're the ones who get the complaints when we make it exclusive to a couple of groups.
Yep, that's
So
fine.
if other people want to be in on the conversation,
I think all interested stakeholders can be part of it. I suspect it'll probably start off small and get bigger.
All right, we'll consider that a friendly amendment. We'll just incorporate in that. Okay, great. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I think we're done. Thank you very much, everybody. And once again, don't forget to get your calendar.